Hello everybody, welcome back. I'm the Strategy Professor, and today we're going to be looking at the 10-18 support tier list. So as always, if you enjoy the content, please be sure to like and subscribe. It really helps out a ton on the channel. Check out the live stream. We stream every night starting around midnight Eastern Standard Time on YouTube. Usually we go till about 4 a.m., sometimes a little bit later. It's a very friendly, chill community. I try to talk as much as I can about the kind of decisions that I'm making in the game and what some of the other decisions are. So I try to be informative, but then we also try to have some fun. I try to, hold as much of a conversation as possible with the channel, even while I'm playing the game. So if you have any questions about League or any, comments about something interesting you've seen lately or how your day's going or just whatever you want to talk about, it's a very friendly, chill community. And we welcome you to come out and join us. We also do content like this every patch. I do new tier lists, patch notes analysis for each patch, and then we also have coaching videos, topical guides, best one trick, what is dodging, when should you dodge, how to improve your macro, what is toxicity, how to work around toxicity, all sorts of content on the channel, so be sure to check all that out. Okay, well, let's go ahead and get in here. So not a ton is going to shake up in this meta. I'll talk about a few things that I think are going to get adjusted. I did move around a few people from last time. If you haven't watched the full patch notes video, go ahead and check that out. I'm just going to very briefly mention the things that I think might affect the support meta. Ashe, I think, is still going to be extremely good right now. Win rate wise, her win rate's not insane. It's okay. It's like 51, 52%, something like that. But I think she's still going to be played a lot. She has a lot of utility. She also obviously has initiation, which means that enchanter supports can still be quite strong because you don't have to have initiation from the enchanter role. There's a lot of initiation going on in the jungle meta and to some extent to the top meta as well. But I think that she's still going to be really strong. She's really good with engaged champs too. Your Leona, your Nautilus, all that stuff. But you could also have like a Sona or a Soraka and be able to get away with that easier because at least you'll have someone on your team that can start a fight if you do have an Ashe. So I think that that is really handy. And I don't think the 2 AD is really going to change much about that. We might see some more Jarvan. That could potentially mean some early aggression. So it's a little bit more dangerous early on if you get like level 2 cheesed by Jarvan, who just like opens red and ganks bottom. I still think that junglers are, for the most part, going to path top. They'll start bottom and then be on the top side ready to fight for that scuttle around 3:15, either ganking top or mid around 3 minutes is kind of the script in a lot of games. But if Jarvan's coming back in and they're bringing Zen back in later on in the patch notes, then those are two champions that do really excel at level 2 kind of cheese ganks. So you got to watch out for that a little bit in the bot lane. Especially if you're up against a hard engaged champ, a Nautilus, a Leona, just something that's going to be able to go all in and fight you early on. You got to be a little bit more careful if you're like a Soraka or a Sona. So that will matter, but I don't think it's going to be a huge deal, a meta-defining shift. Just you might see that in a few more of your games than you have in the past. Kale, I had someone ask me if Kale was going to be a decent support with some of these changes. I still don't think so, and the main reason is that she really, really wants levels, so that you level up her passive, right, and you get all those extra benefits. And as a support, you're always splitting experience, and you're losing levels every time you have to rotate or go ward and things like that. So supports are usually the lowest level in the game, and it's very rare that you would get to level 16 in a lot of games. Most games are closing out between like the 25 and 30 minute mark, and a lot of games you're just not going to get to level 16. And her items are very expensive. It's going to be attack speed, offensive type of items most of the time. So you're going to be seeing a lot of Gunblade, maybe stuff like Hurricane, Blade of the Ruined King, Wit's End. Those types of things are going to be really popular on Kale. And all those are very, very expensive items. So expensive itemization, needs a lot of levels, doesn't bring a lot of CC, has a really long cooldown on her ult, 160 seconds between levels 6 and 11. So I just think there are going to be better choices overall. If you like that type of thing where you can save your ally and you want to give them that free kind of get out of jail card, I would recommend, trying out Lulu with her ult. Gives quite a bit of safety, and then Zillion is really close to that as well. Who I don't have Zillion ranked like super highly on the list, but if you really want that, if you want that Kale type of effect where you can save somebody, then Zillion's a decent choice who has much better itemization and just a better kit for supporting, I think. Kog'Maw got nerfed for one reason or another, whatever, it's not going to matter. Misfortune, you might start seeing a little bit more of her in the meta, so she is very good with someone else who can like layer CC on top of somebody. So with the Nautilus, with the Leona, even something like a Sona, just something that can start a fight and hold him still, and Misfortune can channel her ult. I think that that's going to be pretty good with her. Okay. What else? Set really wasn't played that much as support. He had a pretty low win rate as well. I have people ask me about Set from time to time. What do I think about him? Is he going to be good in the meta overall? And I think that he's primarily being used as a jungler, and I think that he's going to be in a really tough spot as a jungler after these nerfs. So I really don't like him as support that much. He had a 49% win rate as jungle. As a support, you know, he had a 45% win rate. So you do occasionally see him as a support in pro, but his item, like, you can do sort of tanky stuff on him, and, you know, he can do some damage, but I just think he's going to get dominated by some of these longer range, especially these heavy push comps, you know, like your Caitlyn plus Sona, or, you know, your Ashe plus Bart, your Ashe plus Lulu, or Soraka, or something like that. He's just going to have a really hard time. So he has a hard time applying pressure early on in the games. He doesn't have really reliable engage until he hits level 6, and then he gets outscaled later on in the game. So he's like maybe a slightly better version of something like Malphite in the bottom lane. This really doesn't do anything until level 6. But yeah, I don't think he was in a good spot to begin with as a support, and these nerfs certainly aren't going to help. Shin, not that great a support most of the time. This is going to be a nerf to him, so you're probably not going to see him a ton. He's okay. Now, the Twitch one might be one of the biggest shifts in the bottom lane. We'll see. This is going to be very good if Twitch wants to go for Ginsu's. He is going to get more value out of that. It's really rare on Twitch, even though he does get items that work well with Ginsu's. So usually he'll either get a Blade of the Ruined King, or more recently Man Immune, which I really hate that item. But I think if you're going to get that item on a non-traditional Man Immune user, I think Twitch is one of the better ones. I think it's a lot better to get it on Twitch than it would be on someone like Draven, or you know, as any of these other, like Sivir, Ashe, or any of these other people, just because Twitch is already so terrible in the early game, and it doubles down on his like hard power spike at level 2, and just the fact that he has multiple ways to proc the mirror mana damage. So he has his ult and he gets Hurricane, and both of those can double proc it on people. So he has a lot of synergy in his kit with the completed mirror mana, although Mana Immune's not that amazing on him. So I still like Blade of the Ruined King a little bit more. I think it gives you an earlier game power spike, but if you're playing hard for that 2-item power spike, and you're really able to stack up that Mana Immune quickly, so anyways, I think that I think that he can use that pretty well. But what does that mean? Well, Ginsu's might be on the table and stuff, because usually you do whatever, Bork or Mana Immune, and then Hurricane, and then after that Infinity Edge, because he's in a weird spot because he benefits so heavily from on-hit stuff because he triggers it with his ult really well, but his ult can also crit, and Hurricane also provides crit, and the Hurricane bolts can crit. Mirror Mana does not crit, and Blade of the Ruined King does not crit. So if you have Ginsu's, you could get it to double proc very often, but it can't crit. So I don't know. It might depend. It might be matchup dependent, but I'm imagining, like, I just don't know the DPS charts, but in theory, you could do something like Mirror Mana into Hurricane into Ginsu's after that, and that would be a bit more appealing now because you have this 2.0. And you do lose a little bit less for each person, so this would benefit crit because you're getting an extra, it's capping it, so you're basically doing 30% more damage if you're shooting through a minion wave and hitting people, or if you're shooting through a crowd in a team fight and you're hitting everybody, it's going to be a lot more damage. Now that doesn't affect the on-hit damage, I don't think, because the on-hit is calculated separately from the auto attack itself, so this is actually a much heavier benefit for crit builds. But this would be a bigger benefit for Ginsu. So I think it'll probably be about the same, where you do an on-hit item, then Ginsu's, then a crit build. Is probably still going to be the best with Infinity Edge. But we'll just have to see. But anyways, he is pretty strong. He's pretty respectable. A lot of people sleep on Twitch. People just don't like to play him. He can seem kind of risky just because he doesn't have a lot of escapes from hard engage. If someone's just like, you know, Hecarim's running at you or something, there's not a lot you can do about that. But Ashe makes it work. Ashe does have a few more tools. She has her ult, she has her slow, so she has a few more tools in her kit to help out with that. But I think he's, I guess he's lower than I'm used to. I'm used to him being at like 52%. So it is kind of a rough meta with all the divers out there, but if you do get going, he typically scales really, really well going on into the later game. The problem is that sometimes you don't get to late game in the current meta, right? But if he does get there, right, you look at this chart, this win rate, you know, he's kind of like, he's okay off of one item, depending on if you get Man Immune or Bork. But then it's once he gets to those 3 items, right, around 30 minutes, that's when he starts, you know, really taking off and taking over the game. So we'll see, but that would empower some of the Ardent Sensor users if we start seeing more Twitch. You know, stuff like the Lulus and the Jannas will be a little bit stronger in there. And I do want to move on. I don't want to go too far into it. The last one that I'll mention is Guardian, and that is going to affect a lot of the top users. So the people who will be most affected are people who don't have a really good alternative rune. So Recon is the person I think it's somewhat mainstream that can be really good that's going to be most affected by this. I think it'll still be somewhat powerful because if you're not getting a lot of ability power or a lot of bonus health, it's not going to matter that much. So Rakan is getting Kha'zix anyways, which doesn't have any bonus health and no ability power. So that's not going to matter. And then usually his second item or his first item is going to be a Shirelia's. And so that also has a limited amount of health on it, 200. And in that scenario, you're only losing 6 shield off of 200 bonus health. So I don't think that's that big of a deal. So Recon, it seems like it would hurt him, but like with his itemization, I just don't think it's going to matter because he doesn't scale that hard. Bart is another one that people might think of. And it will hurt Bart a bit more. So we'll see. Bart does have alternatives. He can go Electrocute or Hail of Blades, but it's going to be a lot squishier. If you do go for Dead Man's Plate off of Bard, this will matter quite a bit because you're not getting the same health scaling off of the shield. So off of Dead Man's Plate, you're going to lose 12 shield off of yourself and someone else. So that can matter. That can add up in the long run. It depends on how you itemize him afterwards. Usually he's a Shirelia's user, either first or second item. So once again, that's only going to be a 6 difference on the shield. So that's not a big deal. But if you are getting more of an AP build, which is pretty rare on Bard, it's not going to be as strong. Now, if you're doing like a plus healing and shielding build, it's not really going to matter, right? So if you get Redemption, for example, you're going to lose 6 because you're not going to get the health benefit. But the plus healing and shielding is going to roughly be about the same. So it will matter for Recon, it will matter for Bard, but it depends on how you're itemizing. And most of the time, even in like the tough, now you do have to include the healing off a relic or the health off a relic shield as well. I think that's 300 or 350 base, so that will be another 9 or 10 off. So basically what you're looking at in a lot of scenarios, you know, maybe once you get 2 or 3 items in the late game, is you're looking at about 20 to 30 off your shield, probably off of a shield whose base is going to be somewhere in the hundreds, right? So you're probably looking at early game, it's not really going to be noticeable at all. But later in the game, you might be losing 5 to 10% off of your shield. So I still think this is going to be the go-to for those champs. It's probably not going to matter that much, but it could. So keep an eye on it. Other champs that would get particularly hurt by this are already not that great in the meta. So something like a Tom Kench or a Braum, because they are going to be stacking quite a bit of health and they don't get any plus healing and shielding to kind of offset that. Other champs who might be affected by this, you know, someone like a Soraka or a Lulu, they can get other runes, like they can get Airy and be really affected. The same thing with Lux. Now, Lux and Bard are the two that had the widest discrepancy that I looked at, where the Guardian Shield was like 3% higher than the next best rune. So those are the two to really keep an eye on. I think Lux's, there's like a 4% difference between like Airy. Comet was terrible, but between Airy and Guardian, there's like a 4% difference. So Lux is one that I would really look out for here, especially with a lot of these hard engaged champs becoming popular. Most notably, like Hecarim in the jungle is super popular right now. And then you also have stuff like Ashe is still going to be strong. So so I don't think this is going to be like super catastrophic, but for champions where every single item is going to be giving them ability power or health, this could add up a little bit in the long run, but I still think those champs are going to be good. Okay, let's get in here and just go through this really quickly, and I do want to try to make this a bit of a shorter tier list. I know that's always a meme on the channel, but I just wanted to go over what some of the major changes are and just kind of walk through. So I think that Bard overall is still going to be the strongest if you are really proficient on Bard. And I know some people in the, you know, chat have said, oh, well, now he's coming over to Bart after Bart's been nerfed a lot. Bart's been good for a long time. He has been really good for a long time. But you got to keep in mind that there were other things also that were really good. So, yes, I said Bard was good. He was kind of sleeper. And I just said I just wasn't good enough on him to make him work. But if someone was good, then he could be good, right? But, you know, several of those champions have been nerfed over time that were competing for Bard for the role of initiation, right? And the meta has changed to where having good early game harassment and being able to initiate are both at a premium, and having some resilience to dive as well as at a premium. And there aren't that many champs that click all of those boxes, right? So if you think about like Leona and Nautilus, who have dominated over the last few years, they've both been nerfed, or like the last year and a half, they've both been nerfed significantly multiple times this year, right? So they were like really, really good for a long time. And that's why, you know, I think Bard kind of went under the radar for a long time, is because they just initiated so well, and it was all about all in, like hard engaged champs. You're seeing a lot of Misfortune, Jin, a lot of these really aggressive just kill lanes in the early game, and aggressive junglers. And then that has slowly shifted over the course of the season to where now we're in kind of a push-poke early game harassment type of meta. And Bard operates a lot better than Nautilus and Leona do. He works way better with Caitlyn or Ashe, I think, than they do, especially in the early game. It's not to say that those champs can't work with the hard engage, but Bard is ranged, so he can get those auto attacks in there to harass. He has the healing shrines, which are pretty solid in the early game. You can comfortably get a lot of mana regeneration just by picking up those chimes. So you don't have to invest in a lot of fairy charms if you don't want to in the early game. And he does quite a bit of innate damage just with his meeps. And he has a good stun. He's great against other melee champs that are trying to dive you in the middle of a minion wave. You have lots of stun opportunities there. So I think that that has shifted, and that has made him really strong in the current meta. So it's the fact that he can be aggressive early, and that he has a build that can be somewhat tanky with the Deadmans later on, which sort of, and he can roam around really quickly, right? So people have been they've been going Guardian, and then they've been taking the movement speed Hunter, Relentless Hunter, which was buffed earlier in this season. And then you take Deadman's Plate, and Swiftness boosts were also buffed. All that's very good for Bard, because he wants to run around the map, get his chimes, but that also opens up opportunities for him to roam really well. So yes, Nautilus and Leona can roam well also, but they don't have quite as much movement as he ends up getting. And he just gets more benefits from roaming anyways, because at least he's picking up chimes, right? So he's kind of powering up while he's roaming. So even if the roam fails, he's still catching up a little bit, right? He's still getting some experience from those chimes. He's still getting the bonus movement speed. So he just has a lot of the flexibility, and some of these items have been buffed, and some of the other, you know, like I said, adversarial champions have been nerfed, or champs that are competing for the same role have been nerfed. So I still think he's going to be good for all those reasons. He can still push. He still has some sustain with his W. He has really sneaky ganks. So if someone's pushing into you, if a Caitlyn or an Ashe are pushing into you, you know, he can use that magical journey to get a heck run behind him, or to get, you know, any of these other really popular junglers behind him. So he just brings a lot to the toolkit, and the fact that he has a ranged engage that he doesn't have to fully commit to as well. So you can use your ult. It's very versatile. You know, kind of the level 1 thing is you just hit somebody with it. It's 2.5 second stun that can't be cleansed, can't be QSS'd, can't be Mikhails'd. And basically, if you hit somebody clean with that, then they're going to die most of the time if the rest of your team is around. So it's just a really good, clean initiation, fairly low risk. If you don't hit the target, or it's just a bad situation, you hit the wrong target or something like that, you don't have to fully commit to that, right? If you go in with, like, you know, Leona ult or a Nautilus ult, and you know, take the hook and go into that, then you're fully committed to that, right? You're melee. If the fight goes south, you're going to die. With Bard, you can still kind of hang back, throw your Q, throw your autos. Just the fact that he's ranged, he's tanky, if you go for that Guardian plus a Deadman build, and the fact that he has really good initiation makes him really unique in the current meta. And I think he's still going to be very strong if you're proficient on him. So yes, he doesn't have the highest pick rate, or yes, he doesn't have the highest win rate. He's only 51% right now. But I think that he is still going to be really well suited to succeed in this meta overall. And as far as like which items to get on him, you can find access to this Google Doc in the description as well if you're interested in that. I still think that Guardian's going to be there. Overgrowth is pretty popular. There's a lot of different ways you can go with him, but Overgrowth's pretty popular. It does give you more health, which scales really well with Guardian. It just gives you a bit more survivability. Works really well with the armor if you're going to go for a Dead Man's Plate. Demolish is really good if you think you're going to dominate the lane. If you have the Caitlyn or you have the Ashe and you think you're going to be pushing them in all game, that can be really good. If you think there's a chance that you might go Ardent Sensor at some point, I think Font of Life can be worthwhile, especially if you're stacking health. It is going to heal your team for quite a bit if you do get that slow. And then the Font can really help you out if a lot of your team would benefit from the Ardent Sensor attack speed, because whenever you auto attack and apply that slow to somebody, if anyone else auto attacks that person for 5 seconds for the Font duration, they get a heal from you, from Font, and so you can comfortably put Ardent Sensor across your whole team, right? So if you have like a set on your team and you have a traditional ADC like a Twitch, an Ashe, a Caitlyn, something like that, or you have a Kindred on your team, or just anyone else that wants a lot of attack speed, and there's a lot of champs out there right now like that, and that could be an option. Very few people get Ardent on Bard because he doesn't scale that well with AP, but you know, you could go Font. That could give you an option. It also just gives decent healing later in the game and big team fights and stuff like that. You might end up giving 300 or 400 extra healing to your team, especially if you're stacking health. So it's just kind of up to you. If you think you're going to be able to get 2 or 3 towers off of Demolish, I'd probably go with Demolish. That's what I usually do. But there could be situations where Font could be good. I really like either second wind or conditioning. If you think you're going to be getting harassed a lot in the early game, they have like a huge poke lane. It's like Caitlyn plus Senna or Ashe plus Lux or something like that. Then you might consider second wind to heal through it. Then I really like conditioning as a better all-in rune later on. You're getting 500 or 600 gold worth of value. It's always on. Once you cross that 10 or 12 minute mark or whatever it is, it's always on. It scales really well with your health. So I think that's really good. I'm not a huge fan of bone plating. If you think you're going to be getting engaged on and pressured a lot in the very early game, so if they have like a Draven Leona or something like that, then I think that bone plating can be good. But I think that, you know, later on, it's really limited, has a lot of downtime. It has to be the same person who's hitting you, so it doesn't give you protection against multiple targets hitting you. So it's okay. I mean, a lot of people still go bone plating as well, but I tend to like conditioning, especially if you go dead man's. And then what a lot of people are doing is Relentless Hunter has become kind of the standard where you can move around the map really quickly. I think there, in theory, could be an argument for Ingenious Hunter if you're going for a heavy item active build. So if you're rushing Shirelias, which is pretty popular on Bard as well, you're doing like a Shirelias, and then a Redemption, or a Shirelias, Mikhails, or something like that. If you're getting 2 item actives, I think it might be worth it doing that in the early game, because it also affects your sweeper. So you're going to be able to sweep, you're going to be able to clean out more wards, and Bard's really good at that because he's so fast, and he can get away a lot of times with his magical journey if he gets intercepted by the enemy jungle. So I think there's an argument for that, but Relentless is just pretty much always going to be solid. And then depending on your elo, either Ghost Poro or Zombie Ward can be good. Ghost Poro is great because if your team's not warding a lot, you get extra vision out of the Ghost Poro over time, especially in the early game, to help you watch dragons and scuttle spawns and things like that. However, if you're in higher elo, if people are warding all the time, Zombie Ward can be really good. It gives you extra vision. Just allows you to play the vision game a lot better if people are fighting for vision. At lower elo brackets, sometimes people just don't ward very much, and you're just not going to find many wards to take advantage of Zombie. So it just kind of depends on your elo bracket. If you're Challenger, Zombie Ward's going to be way better. If you're Iron, where nobody's warding, then Ghost Poro is probably going to be a little bit better. And then the Swiftness Boot's pretty standard. You know, if you're facing all physical damage, for example, you could go Ninja Tabby. That could help out, but most of the time you want to go Swiftness. Relic Shield pretty much every time. Just guaranteed gold, guaranteed wards. Dead Man's Plate, I like this a lot, unless they have like double or triple AP. I think that it just adds a whole lot of extra value. Gives you the movement speed so you can rotate around, get your chimes, try to make some plays. Gives you a little bit of extra damage on your auto attacks just to give you that initial upfront burst. And then it gives you some pretty decent survivability. The armor plus the health, when you combine that with Guardian, can make it pretty difficult to take you down in a lot of situations. So it is expensive. It is like 2,900 gold, but I think just because Bard leverages the movement and he leverages that upfront damage so well that it can be a really good item on him. Although Shirelias is also particularly strong, and I didn't mention that here actually, but I think Shirelia's is super good on Bard because whenever you hit your ult, for example, you can pop the Shirelia's, and that allows your entire team to follow up and get into position to make a play on that person that you just ulted. Redemption's also good for a similar reason. Whenever you hit your ult on somebody, it lasts for 2.5 seconds, and so as soon as you hit that ult, if you drop the Redemption, it's going to hit whoever you just ulted. So it's almost guaranteed to do the true damage to whoever you hit, or it can heal your ally. So if your ally's in big trouble, if your ADC gets engaged on, you know, you could ult, buy him a little bit of time, drop that Redemption on him, and that might give them a little bit of breathing room to get that heal and then flash out to reposition. So Redemption is just very good and very flexible when you're guaranteed to get certain hits off of it because you're holding people still with your ult. And just Redemption's a really strong team fighting tool in general. So I think all of those are pretty good. Rapid Fire Cannon can be good. I've tried that out in the past. It is a very nice sort of offensive damage type of build. But it doesn't add a whole lot of utility to your team. So if your team is lacking a lot of damage, if you just have like 3 tanks on your team or something, maybe Rapid Fire is okay. But for the most part, I'd probably stick with some combination of these items. Now, a lot of people have kind of moved away from the Athenes. It was really popular for a while, but they did nerf the upfront healing that your W does by a pretty significant margin a couple of patches ago. And I think that's why a lot of people have kind of gone away from it. You do still see some people doing that. It does give you a little bit of extra burst healing if you're consistently landing, those auto attacks. But as I said before, he just really doesn't leverage the AP that well. It's okay, but 2 of his abilities don't have any AP ratios. And his W is, pretty weak for a lot of the game. Once it's level 13, I think it's like 150 heal or something, which is pretty good. But like his Q doesn't have a great AP ratio on it. I think it's like a 0.6, and then his meeps have a small AP ratio. So I just don't think he leverages that ratio that well, and it's okay. It's okay. But I would just rather have either Deadman's or a Shirelia's. First item, the Athenes does have a high win rate. The Shirelia's has an even higher win rate. Deadman's a little bit lower. It's a little bit more situational. I think in lower elo brackets, Deadman's is going to be a little bit better. In higher brackets, Reverie's is going to be better. It just depends on how much AD they have on their team as well. If they're rocking like a Kha'zix or a Hecarim and you're going to be getting Dove potentially, I think that Deadman's gets a lot more valuable. But if they have like an Eve in the jungle and like a LeBlanc mid and, Lux support or something like that, it gets a lot less valuable. So it just kind of depends on where you want to go. But there are a lot of different items that are possible. Okay, we'll move around. We'll move along, talk about the rest here for a little bit, just a little bit faster. So Sona, I think, is still going to be really good right now. So the Guardian nerfs, I believe, are actually going to help her because she can so comfortably use Aerie. They're very, very close in terms of win rates. She applies a ton of damage in the early game. She does have a high win rate overall. So yeah, if we look at win rates here, let's look at 10-17 just because that's there's a lot more data for that. But she does have a good win rate at 52%. She scales super well over time. You just have to be really careful about the divers whenever you're looking at Sona because she doesn't have a lot of protection against something like a Hecarim running at her or a Kha'Zix jumping over a wall. Or if you get poked out early, it can be a problem too because your W is pretty terrible. So if you're in a really hard losing lane, if it's like your teammate picks Ezreal, if it's like Sona Ezreal into like Caitlyn Senna or something like that, and you're going to be getting poked really hard, it can be very rough because your heal is so inefficient early on, especially if your teammate is not trading with you. If you're healing one person with your W, it's terrible. Like 80 mana for a 35 heal is really bad. If both of you are taking really clean, like active trades, and you're getting full value out of the shield and the heal, so if you can use that W while you're trading to get value out of the shield, her heal can be pretty good in lane, but realistically, you're going to be healing people for 35, right? Your ADC is going to be sitting there watching you heal, or they're going to be taking really dumb trades where you're not synced up with them. So, as you can see, like early game, she does struggle a little bit, but if you can get to that 25-minute mark, once you get to those 2 or 3 items, you get your Athenes, plus your Ardent Sensor, plus your, Shirelia's or Redemption or whatever, I think she can be really strong. Oops, hold on. I've got the... Hopefully it hasn't been doing that for too long. I don't know what's up with the camera, but sometimes it just trips out a little bit. So I'll just go ahead and... so sorry if that was kind of weird and distracting. I don't know why it does that. But Anyways, so you got to be careful around divers, but I still think that she is going to be really good. Especially if we kind of look at the rune information down here. You know, Guardians 52%, 52.2, and Ares 52.6. So Aerie, I think, was already better most of the time on her. And so it's going to help it out a lot because the other people who run Guardian got nerfed. She didn't, so she's going to be better. So once again, look out for the divers, but otherwise, I think she's going to be really, really strong. Just because also she has the guaranteed harassment, so she works so well with Caitlyn, with Senna, with, you know, just some of these other early game pressure ADCs because they can't dodge your Q. You just walk up and press Q, it's going to hit them, which is going to apply Aerie, it's going to apply Scourge, and then if you get your empowered auto attack in there, that's a lot of damage too. Versus someone like Soraka, who we'll talk about here in a second, you have to actually hit your Qs, right? They can dodge it, there is counterplay. It is more cost efficient and it is more powerful if you do hit your Qs versus Sona Qs most of the time. But you got to hit them, and you're going to miss a certain percentage of those as Soraka. So that's why I have Sona just a little bit higher. They both scale super well into the late game, but it's just Sona is just that guaranteed power in the early game and works really well with a lot of kind of the team fight comps that are going in there because you can get that, you know, big AoE stun. But they're pretty close. Sona also does work around Grievous Wounds a little bit better because your W is split up into partially a shield and partially a heal. So if they have Grievous Wounds, it'll affect the healing portion, but not the shielding portion. So you do work around that a little bit better versus everything that Soraka does is going to be negatively impacted by Grievous Wounds. So, all right, let's talk about Soraka here really quick. Now, I do like Soraka a lot. Soraka does have better wave clear than Sona does, so you can queue that back line, push, put them in a tower, get priority, go ward, go rotate, get preferable back timings, all of that stuff. So she does have very cheap and efficient wave clear, which is nice. If you do consistently hit those Qs, it does have more efficient and stronger healing than Sona's W does in the early game, so that's really solid. And you do provide global presence with the Soraka, so no matter what's going on around different places on the map, you can always press R and influence the fight. It's kind of like a Karthus ult. So fight going on top lane, you can R, turn it around. You get an assist, they don't die, they get a kill. It can really impact the game. And especially if you take Ulti Hunter, which I think is super strong on her, just because you can get those stacks so easily, right? You can get stacks on the top lane. You can get stacks on the mid lane, even in the early game, right? And it's just guaranteed value out of that ult, right? You can't miss it. It's going to work. It helps everybody. Even if you're ulting to save top lane, it could, you know, turn around mid lane. Maybe mid lane isn't directly fighting, but maybe both of them are at 30% health. You use that ult, all of a sudden, with that extra health, they're able to pressure out the mid laner, deny them some CS, get a preferable back timing, all that kind of stuff. And it can help you out in the bot lane, too. So it's just getting that nice, clean, guaranteed value off of that ult. Yes, they can Grievous Wound it, but it's so much healing. And there's just, you know, no way that you can misplay it, right? It's just always going to work on all of your allies. Even if there's a stasis effect, they change that to where you still heal them. So if someone Zanya's at the same time that you're ulting, you will still heal them in the Zanya's. So there's really no way to misplay that. So it's just really, really strong guaranteed value. You do have to watch out for divers. I do think that Guardian was really good on Soraka, especially when it gave the movement speed. But she can still work really well with Aerie, right? She has a very low cooldown heal. You're going to be spamming it in fights. That means lots of Aerie triggers. You, as long as you're landing your Qs or auto-attacking in lane, you're going to get good value out of those Aerie triggers. You can use Scorch as well if you think you're going to have a dominant lane. The one thing about Soraka, though, is Revitalize. It's just so OP on her because she puts out so much healing off of her ult and her W. You kind of want Revitalize all the time, and you can't have Revitalize, Aerie, and Ulti Hunter all at the same time, so they're in different trees. So if you go Guardian, you also get Revitalize, and that frees you up to be able to go Ulti Hunter. Versus if you go Aerie, you're probably going to have to get Revitalize, right? You're going to get either Bone Plating or Conditioning plus Revitalize. And then you're not going to be able to get Ulti Hunter, which I think is really, really strong on her because she has a long cooldown ult, which is super high impact, and you can stack up, like I said, the Ulti Hunter really well and leverage it early in the game. So she's still going to be really good. I would probably still get Guardian with her. There are a lot of builds where you don't get any AP on her, or not a lot, so I don't think it's going to matter. So for instance, a lot of times you would get a Mikhail's, which is just plus healing and shielding, which that doesn't affect the scaling on Guardian. And then Redemption after that, which does have like 200 health on it. But as we said before, that's going to convert over to like 6 less shield. So I think that she's actually going to be one of the people who's affected less just because you don't have to get Athene's Unholy Grail. Athene's is probably the item that's going to be hit the hardest with it because that gives out so much AP, and they nerf the scaling on the AP a lot. But you don't have to get Athene's. You don't have to get Ardent Sensor. You can get those if you want to, but I think that Mikhail's Redemption is also super, super powerful on her, especially in a meta where you're going to be seeing a lot of Ashes, a lot of other, hard engage type of champs. I think that Mikhail's can be super valuable. So anyways, I think Soraka's still going to be pretty good. In just a few more minutes here, and then I got to get out of here and meet with some students in a Zoom conference. So I'll pick it up a little bit and talk about the rest. Now, Lulu does have a really high pick ban influence. She's picked a lot. She's banned a lot. She still kind of has about the same win rate as everybody else. A lot of the top end supports are all floating around like 52%. So no one's too far out of line, but they're all like pretty good. They're all above average. So the thing about Lulu is she's best if you have someone like an ADC or just someone else who wants a lot of attack speed. She's best at handing out just tons and tons of extra leverage for that person, right? So she gives out a lot of extra attack speed herself. She gives out extra on attack with picks, which is really strong off of just a couple of items. You can give out like an extra 70 or 80 on-hit damage, which is massive. It's very, very good on champion that's stacking a ton of attack speed, like an Ashe or a Twitch or a Vayne, anything like that. So she's really, really good at helping your super fed offensive person be even more powerful. So if you have a hyper scaler on your team, a Kog'Maw, a Vayne, a Twitch, that type of thing, she's going to be really, really good. And she offers some nice single target anti-assassin protection. So she's got her ult, which empowers somebody, knocks them up. But then she also has her polymorph. If you don't want a Whimsy, your AD carry for the extra movement speed and attack speed, you can polymorph assassins in order to buy some time for your AD carry to kill him, right? Now that a lot of champs do have counterplay to that, so like Master Yi can alpha strike your polymorph. It's not going to affect Hecarim if he's charging in. Fizz can jump it with his trident. So there is a lot of counterplay, a lot more than you would think off of a point-click ability, just because it does have a projectile. It's not instant. There is a cast time to it and a projectile. It's pretty fast, but it's not instant. So a lot of people, have ways to get around that. But nevertheless, she's very good if your team is already just packed with damage and you have lots of hyper carries. Also great with things like Master Yi or Kindred, just anything else that's going to really benefit heavily from that attack speed that's like a super heavy damage dealer. She's pretty good with divers too. If you do have a Hecarim or a Jarvan or anything like that and they're getting in there, you can press that ult and chain that CC together. Obviously great with something like a Yasuo who wants that knock up from the ult. So there are a lot of situations where she can be pretty good. Great against invisible stuff, good against Twitch or good against Vayne. Because if you put your picks on them with the E, it does reveal them for 4 seconds. So pretty good against invisible type of champs as well. Kha'zix. But overall, she's still going to be really good. She's just a little bit riskier. She doesn't have a heal in lane. She doesn't have the best peeling tools. So she doesn't have the best defensive tools. Like Whimsy's okay. The ult's okay, but it's only single target. Versus Sona can CC multiple targets. Soraka can heal multiple targets. So she's going to be a little bit better in kind of these smaller scale skirmishes. But she's still really, really good. And probably adds the most value to someone who's really fed that scales really well off the attack speed. Janna's another one that I'll mention here coming down the line. She does have pretty good aggression in the early game, especially if you go Comet with her plus W, which is really common. You can also do Airy, but she scales really nice with those things. Comet works with her because her W applies a pretty big slow also, so it's almost guaranteed you're going to hit the Comet. Versus a lot of the other enchanters, their harassment abilities don't slow. Soraka's does, but she gets so much value off of either Airy or Guardian that she just kind of have to take it. But she's pretty good. She's great against a lot of these all-in type of champs and divers. She can be very good at sort of neutralizing things like a Hecarim, like a Leona, like a Nautilus. So we are starting to see more dive. Great against stuff like Jarvan. You know, you can blow him out of the pit if he traps your Ashe, you know, in his ult. You can't cleanse that with a Kale's if you're something like a Soraka, but as a Janna, you can blow the Jarvan out of that pit. So she can get people out of really sticky situations that a lot of other enchanters really can't do because she has so much displacement and disruption in that form. So scales really well. She has a bit of a harder time in the early game just because her shield is on such a long cooldown. It's very difficult to find windows to trade because it's a pretty low amount early, and you're also putting points in your W so that you can harass, which is not your defensive tool, versus with someone like Lulu, you're getting points in your shield with your E, but that's also your offense and your defense early on. So you have the defense if you need it, but you also have the offense if you need it that way. So I just think that the skills early on in the game and just like the way that trading patterns go favor someone like a Lulu over a Janna. But as the game unfolds later on in the game, Janna is one of the best at protecting your backline from divers, and divers are very popular right now. Like I said, you got the Hecarim, you got the Kha'zix, Leona, Nautilus. There's a lot of stuff trying to get on that back line, and just the ability to reset that with your R can completely turn fights around. So I think she's great if you're not sure, if you want to just protect against divers. She's also really good against split pushers because she can rotate around the map so quickly, and she can protect your core in the middle of the map from getting engaged on. So if you have a Camille or a Fiora who's really strong in the side lanes, or a Shin, and you're seeing a lot more of this, you're seeing split pushers kind of come back into the meta a little bit. You know, one of the two ways that people will try to attack split pushers is, one, they'll try to go double team the split pusher, right? Send another person after them. You can help with that by, you know, safely applying more wards in the enemy jungler to help to help protect your split pusher, give them the vision. You can rotate over there if they're in trouble and get them out. If they're running towards you, you give them the extra movement speed, and then you have your tornado, your shield, your slow off your W, your ultimate if you need it. So you have a lot of tools to get people out of hot situations, like a split pusher trying to run away from 2 or 3 people. But then also another way people try to attack split pushing is to hard engage on your mid lane. So if they know they're not going to be able to 1v1 that Fiora in the side lane, or maybe even 2v1 the Fiora, maybe they just try to hard engage and catch someone out. So your 4 people that are in the mid lane, maybe there's a Caitlyn who's a little bit out of position, you know, pushed up past the first tower, which has already been destroyed, and she's about to get engaged on. You can protect her better than almost any other support, right? With your tornado, your ult, your shield, all that kind of stuff. So it's just really hard to force plays to make a hard engage on a team. And if your team's already in a winning position, either through split pushing or through a heavier scaling backline, you know, if you've got something like Twitch on your team that's getting really fed, and they have something like a Draven or a Misfortune or something like that that doesn't scale as well as the game goes on, then Janna's really good. So she's kind of like just a protector and a win more type of champ, but her biggest problem is early game. She can get bullied by other ranged harassed champions, your Xeraths, your Zyras, Luxes, stuff like that. She doesn't have a heal, and it's a long shield, and she has no way of reliably starting fights. So if no one on your team has a way to engage, it can be very difficult to make plays, and you're just kind of like hoping that your team doesn't make too many mistakes that you can't fix. But it's harder to be proactive with her than some of the other supports out there, and kind of all of the enchanters to some extent fall into that camp. You know, but at least Lulu can speed up someone like a Hecarim, right? Sona can like ult or flash ult if you really need to start a fight. Soraka can just apply a lot of global pressure with her ult. So yeah, that's one of the tough things with enchanters in general, is it can be a little bit harder to engage. Then the last few here, and then I gotta get out of here and go to a conference. I think that Nautilus will be a little bit stronger just because Aftershock supports are going to be better, just because Guardian supports got a bit weaker. So I don't expect him to, you know, go back up to like 54%, but, you know, he is pretty good, right? If he gets a hold of the Sona or the Soraka or the Bard or something like that in the early game, you can kill them. They are trying to add in more, early game aggression by buffing up the Jarvan, by buffing up the Zen. So if you have someone who's going to come cheese bot with you and try to hard engage level 2, you know, Nautilus is going to be one of the better champions at that, and Leona to a certain extent. So just have really reliable engage. If you have a champion that can really bully out in the early game, you got the newly buffed Misfortune, you got a Draven on your team, you got a Caitlyn who they didn't nerf for some reason. you know, who's really good at managing those traps and combos, you can definitely make some plays and try to snowball really hard. And then if you have hard engage also on your team, it just frees up the rest of your team to run something more aggressive, right? So they can run something like Kha'zix in the jungle more comfortably if you're running Nautilus or Leona, right? Because if they want to run Kha'zix in the jungle and your mid laner wants to run Zed and your top laner wants to run Camille or Fiora or something like that, and you know your bot lane wants to play Ezreal, well, that's all good, but like you don't have any tanks, you don't have any engage in that comp, and that can be problematic. So it just frees up your team to play more damage-oriented carry champions in other roles, most notably the jungle and the top lane, if you go for that. So that can really help out a lot of the team comps out there if you're getting one of those hard engage tanky type of champs, even though they do get outscaled on a personal kind of one-on-one basis by the Janna, by the Sona. It just might make more sense with your team comp to run something like that, especially if it's an early aggression, like I said, type of champ that can snowball really hard. Your Draven, Misfortune, Jin, that type of stuff. So I think they will make a bit of a comeback just because Guardian got nerfed a little bit. Aftershock's going to get a little bit better by comparison, but I still don't quite feel comfortable putting them tier 1 just because they do get outscaled so hard and so quickly, and they don't really push that well. Because with Caitlyn, Ashe, Jhin, a lot of these champs, the meta right now is to push in a tower, and if they're under tower in the early game, then it's going to be very hard to hard engage, right, until you get a lot more armor because the tower is going to be protecting them, obviously. So I just think with the kind of meta right now, the hard push and poke type of meta, it can be a little rough. However, you can put them in tower and then go rotate if you have an aggressive jungler. So you can try to make plays in the mid lane. You can get deep vision and try to invade. So if we see a shift to more kind of early game aggressive junglers, the Jarvans, if Lee Sin comes back, Xin Zhao, stuff like that, then Leona and Nautilus are going to be looking a little bit better. Blitzcrank is another one that I think can be really strong. Blitz's strength is that he doesn't have to fully commit to go in. He pulls people completely out of position out. So it's a lot better if they're under tower if you're fishing for hooks with Blitzcrank than if you're fishing for hooks with Nautilus, if that makes sense. He also does a ton of damage, way more damage by himself than Nautilus and Leona do. So it's going to be a lot more guaranteed that you get those early game kills before people get a lot of health, before they get a lot of magic resist. He does a ton of damage. So he's just really one-dimensional, right? Like you have to hit the hook. If you don't hit the hook, it's terrible. And they have lots of opportunities to flash it, dash around it. If they're, you know, going for lethality items, they can get Edge of Night, or an AP champ can get Banshee's Veil. So there are a lot of tools that can help people work around Blitz. But, you know, if you full dominate, if they're running a lot of squishy champions, which you're starting to see more of that in a lot of roles, and you can grab those squishy champs, you can completely take over and dominate the game as Blitzcrank. So I think that he definitely does have some opportunities there. Recon, like I said, the Guardian nerf's going to hurt him a little bit, but he's still really good, especially against Assassins. If we start to see, you know, more Kha'Zixes in the jungle, Zeds, Fizzes, stuff like that, he's really good at helping to protect himself because he's so mobile. He can get around, you know, different kinds of assassins. He can itemize armor with Ninja Tabby and Zeke's if he needs to. He can protect his allies with Guardian and his shield, Redemption, all that kind of stuff. So he's just super flexible, super strong. He's just not great in a push and poke meta. He's pretty weak in the early game. He has no wave clear. His poke is extremely weak with his Q. So that is problematic. But as the game goes on, he does bring a lot of utility. He does have that engage and the scaling of enchanters on his shield. So I think that that can make him pretty strong. And then the final one that I'll talk about is Senna. She can be good. I like the Glacial Augment version earlier. I think you come online faster. You have cheaper items. You're able to get Umbral Glaive, which gives you Supreme Vision Control, which I think is super important in this meta right now. Some people still, you know, I know there are holdouts that still love the Grasp. And then the Ice Hammer, I always blank out on the name of that thing, but with the Ice Hammer and the Black Cleaver and stuff like that, Frozen Mallet, that build can work. It's just more expensive. You have to really leverage that in the early game. You got to get a lot of those procs off of Grasp, and that can be decent, but I think a lot more people have been shifting back towards the Glacial Augment build a little bit more, and I feel like it is a bit more successful. Although, I don't know. It's close. It's very close to like 50-50 a lot of times. It's almost literally 50-50, right? They're very, very close to the pick rates. It's slightly more popular to pick the Glacial Augment build, you know, maybe like 20% more popular. And then it's 0.1% slightly lower than the grass build. So it's just very situational. It just depends on how well you can leverage that grass bin lane, how well you're gonna do. So if you have a hard dominant lane, a Caitlyn and Ashe, whatever, you can do really well with it. I think it can be good. But if you're not really sure, you might get camped, you're kind of in a losing lane, you got Ezreal on your team, they have Draven, Leona, it's kind of spooky. Maybe just go for the cheaper item build, go for the Glacial Augment, just you get that guaranteed value, even if you're not going to get a ton of gold, even if you're not going to get a ton of grass stacks. But anyways, that's going to be it. Thank you very much. Hopefully you enjoyed this. Please be sure to like and subscribe if you did, and I'll see you next time. Have a good day.